Welcome, security pros and hacker news fans and enthusiasts. Welcome to another webinar. I'm really excited for this one. Those who don't see, if the face looks familiar but a little different, it's because Yiftach Keshet from Silverfort is with us. Yiftach, welcome to another webinar with the Hacker News team, man. It's great to have you back.
Sure. Hi, James. Great honor. Great time to be here as usual.
Yeah, you look a little different. I'm not gonna lie. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
if people go back to the old webinars and be like, "Is this the same guy? Is it the same guy?" I could think he is.
Yeah. So actually, there's a new startup here of time machines, and they needed some they've done some beta testing, and yeah, I just took 13 years out of my life. Technically, I'm 24 now.
Everyone, a startup that takes you back 13 years in your life, I'll gladly take that. Um, and go back 13 years. Who wouldn't? Right? Who wouldn't? All right. Love the humor from our audience. Good morning and welcome, or good afternoon. Sorry, I don't know why I said good morning. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another Hacker News webinar series. My name's James Cesar. I'm a chief information security officer. I'm also the moderator on behalf of your favorite website, the Hacker News. We've got an awesome presentation today. Yiftach Keshet is no stranger to the Hacker News webinar. The feedback and surveys after every webinar we do with the team over at Silverfort, specifically Yiftach, always come back highest rated, so we continue to bring them back to the webinar series here. Yiftach is going to be talking about the top 5 ITDR evaluation criteria. He's the VP of product marketing at Silverfort, and the team and I at the Hacker News here are proud to have them as our partners in this webinar, a journey that y'all keep asking for. So ITDR, Yiftach, floor is all yours. Questions, comments, put them all there. We'll see them. We'll try to get to as many of them as possible. And the floor is all yours, Yiftach. Let me.
Cool. Let's start. So, top 5 ITDR evaluation criteria. I think the best place to start is just to ask, so why even ITDR? Why identity threat detection and response? I mean, this is a relatively new term, right? And we did have cybersecurity for the last 2 decades. We've never heard about identity threat detection and response until a couple of years ago. So how come this new category even came into existence? So in order to answer that, let's try to break it down. Like, what is the ITDR mission? And the answer is to detect malicious access attempts that use compromised credentials. Okay. Some of you may wonder, is that a new attack? I mean, haven't hackers used compromised credentials 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago? So the answer is yes, they did. Okay. But apparently we had some more urgent topics to take care of, like malware, like network traffic. Anyway, this now is starting to gain attention.
Yeah,
And
to
it's
give context, because I see the comments here real quick, Yiftach, just 10
Mhm.
seconds. The reason identity is the new perimeter. It's the new endpoint, right? Previously, we were focused on the endpoint, the server, the laptop. It's not that we're not anymore. It's just that identity is a far more efficient way for threat actors to gain access.
Exactly. Exactly. And when we're asking ourselves why is ITDR even needed, this is because nearly every ransomware attack today spreads via password theft and lateral movement. Okay, we talk there's also malicious access through VPN. There's malicious access account takeover in SaaS applications. Basically, all of a sudden we realize that identity plays a far more major part in cyber attacks than we thought it did. And as a result, this new security category has emerged. And as it always happened, there are dozens of vendors that say, yeah, I mean, this is an ITDR solution. You hear that from the endpoint guys, from the network guys, from startups, from big companies. And this time where a new category is shaping can be rather confusing for us buyers, for security practitioners. So how can I know what ITDR solution to choose? So this is exactly what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to share with you my subjective, private insight into ITDR. What are the 5 most important capabilities that your ITDR solution has to check? And let's start this journey. But before that, okay, a glimpse of a zoom in. Okay, so identity threats and ITDR one-on-one. What we have in front of us, this is the most standard scenario, right? We have an attacker. This is our guy, the attacker. And the attacker was able to compromise a machine. This usually does not involve identity at all, right? It happens through exploits, through spear phishing, with malware, with logins, whatever. The attacker now has compromised this machine. But as we always know, this machine, this endpoint, is not this is not the objective of the attack, right? If it's data theft, the sensitive data it probably resides somewhere else. If it's ransomware, one machine is nothing. The attacker want to plan the payload in as much machine as possible. So he has to make it, he or she or they or whatever pronoun we use, have to make their way from this endpoint onwards into the network, to other servers, to other endpoints. In order to do that in an enterprise environment, you must compromise a user account. And with these compromised credentials, you try to access as many resources as you can. Okay? Again, this is not something new. The important thing is that this one, like ITDR, is about this, about the time in the attack where the attacker provides legitimate yet compromised credentials to gain access. And the task of ITDR is to reliably detect if what we have here inside this magnifying glass, if it is legitimate or malicious. And while it may sound trivial, this is actually a task that is beyond the scope of endpoint protection or network protection or SIEM or any other traditional solution that we have in our security stack. And you know something, I think the best way to understand it is through a demonstration. Okay, I have this machine, ACAWC RD161. Okay, apologize for the name. Suppose my name is Yiftach, and let's suppose that I'm the admin of this environment. Okay, and this is my machine. Now, as an admin, I sometimes get calls from people. Let's say James is also an employee in my company, and James calls me, says, "Listen, Yiftach, my computer is super slow. It's not working at all. Can you figure that out? Can you troubleshoot?" I say, "Sure, that's great." So I open a command line. I type this command, right? I'm writing this psexec. This is James's computer, and I'm logging in. Okay, I go here. I click enter. I click enter. Apparently, I have two. What's happening? Okay. I click enter. Now I insert my password.
I love real demos. Love them.
Definitely, right? And as you can see, I'm now no longer in my computer. I'm logged into this CARCW1. Okay? And then over there, I do my magic. I figure out, I troubleshoot all the problems that James might have, and will have in his computer, and we end the day as best buddies. But let's assume there's an attacker that was able to compromise my password. And this attacker now lands on this computer, on the RD16.2. Now, this attacker wants to spread in the environment. He's using the exact same command that I would use, right? And he enters my password, my compromised password. And what do you know? Okay. And he was able to do the exact same thing. There is no component in the security stack, not Active Directory, not the EDR, not the net, not the internal firewall that can discern between the exact same command with the exact same credentials that is at one occasion used by me and at the second occasion by the attacker. This is the problem that ITDR wants to solve. How can I identify and discern between malicious and legitimate use of credentials? Make sense so far? Oh,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
okay. So if this is the problem we want to solve, now let's start talking about what are the base requirements in order to actually solve it. So, number one, coverage, breadth, and depth. Okay, basically, when we're talking about protecting identities, we need to remember that there are several types of identities in the environment, right? There are standard user accounts, okay? There are admins, like myself from the previous example. There are also service accounts or machine-to-machine accounts or non-human identities. They actually have become quite significant buzzword in the past few months. The ITDR basically has to look on all of them to monitor and analyze the behavior of all of these accounts. And and I apologize in advance. I'm going to use the term non-negotiable several times throughout this webinar. This is a non-negotiable capability because if I only protect the admins, as some companies do, they have their PAM solution, they're protecting the admins, the attackers will just take the users or the service accounts. If I'm protecting the service accounts, they go through the admins. Attackers will always try to find a vulnerable account. Hence, the same way that my endpoint protection analyzes every running process, every file, the same way that my firewall analyzes every incoming network traffic packet, the ITDR must be able to see and analyze all of these account types. The next thing is, of course, the access interface. When you want to log into certain resource, you do it through an interface. If it's a SaaS app, you do it through the browser. If it's a file server, through a network share. I've just shown you how you do that with a command line. There are RDP, WMI. Again, there are multiple access interfaces, and the ITDR should be able to see and analyze all of them. And of course, last but not least, actually the most important, in today's environment, we are hybrid, right? We have endpoints, we have servers, we have SaaS applications, we have cloud workloads. Every now and then, I would say, I think like the recent research showed that there may be 8% of companies that are totally 100% cloud native. Most of us are hybrid. And again, it means that the ITDR should be able to monitor users' access to any type of these resources, whether it's an on-prem database or a dev environment in Azure or Amazon or Office 365 or Box or any other SaaS application. Okay, look, to summarize, ITDR's scope should cover authentications and access attempts in the hybrid environment. Are there any incoming questions on that?
I say let's keep rolling,
Sure.
and we'll get to some here after the demo.
Okay, cool. So I just want we'll throughout this demo, I will and whenever I introduce one of the evaluation criteria, I'm going to show you how it can be implemented, how we implement this at Silverfort. So you can see here at Silverfort dashboard, this is exactly what a coincidence, exactly what I've said. Okay, here we have the users, all type of them. Here we have the resources, right? Servers, services, cloud apps. Here we have the directories, Azure AD, Okta, Ping, and any other. These are what we have in our demo environments, but you can have much, much more. And what you have here are the authentications and access attempts that the users are trying to access resources, and Silverfort's ITDR analyzes all of them as they are coming, as they are passing through. Okay, and again, this is extremely important because if I'm protecting only Active Directory managed assets, the attacker will pawn me through my Okta or my Ping or my Azure AD, because all of these environments are extremely connected to each other. Okay, I think it was in one of the previous webinars that we've discussed the concept of a vertical movement of attackers that compromise your cloud, hop to the on-prem, move in the on-prem, hop back to the cloud. So in order to deliver the identity protection that we want, we must have it across all users, all resources, and all access interfaces. Next comes the near real time as possible. Okay, and I want to confess. Okay, I had a real inner struggle whether to call this near real time or just real time. I've decided to be a bit modest. Okay, and basically what I'm saying is if what we are trying to protect with our ITDR is the scenario in which a user logs into a resource and we need to have a viable way to make sure that this is indeed a legitimate user. So we have the ITDR monitoring and risk analysis must be applied to the authentication and access attempt itself. Okay, as opposed, for example, one might say, you actually, why not just analyze the logs, right? Every access attempt is logged somewhere in the directory, in the seam, in the endpoint itself. We can, if what we're searching for is I don't know, user is access anomalies, we can always just reactively track back what happened. And I want to argue that this is a great mistake. It's like an ITDR must be present while the user is performing the actual authentication, while the user is performing the actual access attempt. Why is that? Because there is a lot of things happening throughout this process that if you don't have visibility into them, you can never flag them out. Okay. Again, I'll share with you an example. So here in Silverfort's, this is Silverfort's log screen. Think so? Yeah, definitely. So I've filtered here to show some of the some examples of authentication that were flagged as critical. Okay. Now this one, why was it critical? Because it was several factors: login by built-in administrator account, is a domain admin, user with old password, shared device. Now this is example. We don't need real-time visibility into the authentication to know that, right? We can take this data just from querying directory for user configurations. So there is some amount of threat detection you can achieve without that. But if we scroll down and we look at two other sample authentications, here we have a suspected user brute force. Okay, now you can never see that unless you sit on the authentication itself. Here, for example, you have a suspected ASREP roasting. Okay, you cannot spot this technique unless you are on the authentication itself. And I think we had and we have another one. This one, for example, was performed over NTLMv1. This also you can never see unless you have visibility into the authentication as it happens. Okay, so this is evaluation factor number 2. Number 3, and this is my favorite, it's about multi-layered risk engine. Okay, like I assume, I mean, based on former acquaintance with the audience of these webinars, people here know their way around cybersecurity. Okay, cybersecurity as we know it, basically, it's all about anomaly detection, right? We basically say when you have a malicious activity, this malicious activity will feature some traits that should never be present in legitimate activity, right? Now, but as you all know, what is the I would say what is the big Satan of defensive cybersecurity? It's false positives. Sometimes you have an anomaly that can occur. It can occur within the context of malicious activity, but it can also occur within the context of legitimate activity as well. Now, the way to counter that, it's basically implement as much layers as possible of anomaly detection. Okay, in our context of identity, let's take, for example, these 4 groups. Okay, there are protocol anomalies. Protocol anomalies. So if you've heard about attacks like pass the hash, pass the ticket, silver ticket, curb roasting, whatever, all of these attacks basically involve some modification of the standard authentication protocol. Okay, the placement of the ticket might be wrong. The encryption level of the packet is downgraded. Several of these things can happen. Now, they can indicate that there's an attack, but there are also some legitimate scenarios in which they occur. Okay, so we can't trust the protocol anomalies by themselves, but if we have also a user anomaly, basically meaning that this target machine was never accessed by the user before, and if we also have access anomalies, basically saying that this user previously attempted to access 20 machines within 2 minutes, and if we have also anticipated attacker actions that we've learned from former attacks, basically all these groups, whenever these groups intersect, they exponentially increase the accuracy. Okay, because the protocol anomaly, okay, if it comes together with all of these, there's much higher chances that this is indeed an attack. Okay, and like to show you the example, we have here the admin account, right? And we have two access attempts, one to server one, the other one for server two. Now, if we try to search for anomalies, we see that in the access to server one, we've detected one anomaly. It's a new machine. The admin has never accessed it before. You might say, looks suspicious, but actually it might be that this is really a new machine that was just introduced into the environment yesterday. Okay, so we don't have enough grounds here. Now, server 2 is also a new machine, but the admin also accessed multiple of new machines before that, and all of these authentications featured weaker encryption than we'd expected. Okay, so and then the ITDR now has grounds to say the access attempt to server 1 was legit. It was done by the actual admin, while the access attempt to server 2 was malicious and was done using the admin's compromised credentials. Okay, so as many anomaly detection layers as possible, okay, would increase accuracy and minimize false positives. Okay, the way this is implemented here. So, for example, this is the identity threat detection screen, and as you can see, we identify a lot of anomalies and match them into attack techniques. Now, and again, but the way we can cross them is, for example, we can configure a policy that is based on the ITDR's risk engine, and then we can choose risk indicators. And we say only when all of the followings are detected. Like in this example, admin with SPN, authentication spike, weakly encrypted ticket, suspected ASP roasting, only when all of these occur together, only then trigger a protective action. So this was number 3. Number 4 is super important, and this actually is because it exceeds the confinement of the ITDR itself. Okay. Now, as you probably know, all the DRs, the endpoint detection and response, the network detection and response, all DRs, their role in life is to detect, right? To detect, to alert, to tell you something is wrong. But since this is identity, we actually can expect a bit more. In identity, we have the identity-specific security controls, for example, like MFA, like block access, and in a way, we should expect the ITDR to be able to connect, to communicate with these components. So let's take this scenario. I have a user. The gray arrow represents the potential path of this user to this server. Now, authentication starts, but ITDR detected that there might be a threat here. Now, we can stop here, throw an alert to the SOC, okay? We all know what happens to alerts that get to the SOC, right? They just get piled and piled and piled and piled and deleted at the end of the day. But if the ITDR, for example, can inform the directory, tell the directory, whether it's Entra, Okta, or Active Directory itself, the ITDR can inform the directory this access attempt is actually malicious, block it, okay? Or even better, the ITDR can trigger MFA, and the MFA will challenge the user, will ask them, did you actually try to access this resource? And if the user says no, then the ITDR would again instruct the directory to block access. And this is very important. Actually, this is a very important point, because if you think of it, MFA is the ultimate verifier for detected risk, because the price tag for false positive is extremely low. What happens with MFA, if it's a false positive, the security team didn't waste a single second. The actual user, maybe lost 5 seconds of his time to click on the app and saying, no, I didn't try to access that. But if it's a true positive, in that case, we get an ironclad indication who is the compromised user, who are the compromised machines. We just need to go, we need to track back the trail of this user, and we literally have the entire attack in the palm of our hands. Okay? So the ability to trigger identity controls in place to verify, detect the threats with MFA, and block access if necessary. And now, just want to show you a quick example. Okay, so remember the scenario we had before, the one in which we couldn't tell, the difference between between the legitimate admin and the compromised one. So if we'll go here, let's go here to the policy screen. Okay, and we'll enable a policy that basically relies on the ITDR, and it's called lateral movement protection. Okay, admin credentials from non-admin source. Basically, it means, right, I'm the admin, right? I'm Yiftach, I'm the admin. When I'm using when I connect to multiple machines, and I'm doing that from my computer. Now, even if my credentials will get compromised, there is a very small chance that the attacker will actually have hold on my machine, right? So once this policy is enabled, we're going back here. So here, let's assume that me, as Yiftach, again, trying to connect to James's machine. Okay, I'm there, right? Because I'm the admin, and this is what I should do. However, if the attacker will try to do that now, so you see these three dots. Now what happens is that okay, I don't know if you can see it in the camera, but actually I got an MFA asking, did you try to access that? And I'm clicking no. And the attacker can't access ACAWCCRW1. Okay, this is the power of being able to chain the threat detection of the ITDR with actual to real-time security controls. And last, integration with the security stack. And as we perfectly well know, no security solution is a lone ranger, right? They work within a context. Okay, the ITDR must be able to share risk signals with the SIEM, right? The ITDR also should feed the XDR with the identity risks that only the ITDR can see, okay? And get from the XDR risk signals relating to the endpoint, to the network traffic, to everything else that the ITDR can't see by itself. And with the SOAR, the ITDR with its ability to trigger the identity security controls like MFA or block access can be integrated with the automated playbooks response playbooks of the SOAR. For example, the SOAR would know that we're now in recovery mode. Hence, for the foreseeable future, any user account that was part of this attack must step up their authentications with MFA, and there are again multiple of other examples for that. These are okay, and let's summarize everything we've just talked about. We talked about coverage, right? All users, all resources, all access interfaces. It's quite intuitive. We talked about being real time or as near real time as possible, and I think we've shown the importance of that. We talked about the ability to intersect multiple risk analysis layer, multiple anomaly detection perspectives or dimensions, okay, to get as much intersection as possible and increase our accuracy. Then we talked about moving from only detection and response to collaborating with the identity security control to get real-time protection. And then we've concluded by basically saying this ITDR should be able to be part of the wider security fabric, SecOps fabric that you have in your environment. Okay. I think this.
We're at time. I mean, I'm really proud of us because we're at 29 minutes, and I know some people have to drop, but we're going to do a Q&A today. We get to do an amazing Q&A because we've got some great questions. So I'm going to start off with Neil. Neil's actually has a question, and I think it relates back to this specific slide here, and again, I'm not going in any specific order, so for everyone kind of kind of going around it. Um, how do you sell security operations in ITDR?
That's a hard one, actually. SecOps historically don't are so focused on detection and detection, triage, investigation. Uh, I would be honest. It's a hard sell. It's easier now than it was a year ago. But basically, my play is to tell them, listen, guys, be honest. Do you have anything effective against lateral movement, against ransomware spread? Do you have the ability to detect in real time whether an access attempt is malicious or benign? And if you can do that, do you have also the ability to block it in real time? Or the best you can get is retroactively noticing that some anomaly has occurred, and now you have to investigate it while the attack is in full gear. Okay, I strive for the ability to pinpoint malicious access in real time and block that. This is my strongest card when I'm trying to bring ITDR to the SecOps table.
So we have another question. This is from AB, I believe AB or Abe, and it's around the risk engine here. So hang on, let me just make a long comment short. Um, how does ITDR reduce RDP risk?
Oh, basically, let's put it like this. RDP is an authentication, right? What happens with RDP is that you have user on machine A, okay, that is wants to access machine B. In order to do that, this user authenticates, right? You have to provide your credentials. Now, basically, this is no different than any other authentication that takes place in the environment, right? And this really relates back to our first evaluation criterion. We're saying ITDR, whenever as a user, you provide your credentials to access a resource, this is something the ITDR should have visibility, risk analysis, and enforcement into. Okay, and RDP is the same as PSExec, is the same as PowerShell, is the same as opening a browser. It's the same as logging to your VPN through the access portal. Okay, no difference.
Brilliant. Let's see here. We've got a bunch of questions on today's webinar, and I want to pick I want to see ones that repeat themselves a few times because I feel like those are maybe more pressing than others. So let's see here. I think this one's a good one. Let's go to this one, right? So in the demo you showed this, so I think this relates to that. But all the different Active Directories that exist. So this is a question that's coming from about 4 different people in different variations. I'm going to try and summarize it in one.
Okay.
Right. So when we see all the when you look at all the different directories that you have on the Silverfort platform, how do you validate if a directory is there a way to validate a compromise of a directory through Silverfort?
So the answer is yes. Okay. So, but we have to remember, like compromise a directory. Okay, this is the last stage of this is the last stop of a multi-stage process. Okay, let's assume in order to compromise a directory, what does that mean? It means that the attacker was able to gain admin level access to the directory itself, right? And as an admin on the directory, the attacker now creates new users, plants malicious scripts. Basically, when this corresponds to the term domain dominance, right? Now, in Silverfort, there are several things we can do. At least hopefully, we'll be able to identify the malicious attempt to move towards the domain dominance, okay, before the attacker can actually achieve that. Okay, and again, usually you won't hop from the patient 0 machine to the directory itself. This is one thing. B, we are monitoring also the behavior. We're creating a behavioral baseline for all the existing users. right? So if the attacker will use a compromised admin identity, suppose the attacker was able to bypass miraculously all of Silverfort's defenses, sitting on a domain controller, definitely they will feature anomalous behavior that will trigger an alert for us. And again, and last, but if they'll create new users, right? If they'll try to create a golden ticket, basically all the malicious activities, or most of the malicious activities that an attackers will initiate as they've compromised the directory, will be able to pinpoint them and block them.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think we're at time here, y'all. Some great questions from our audience, some great funny comments throughout. But I'll tell you one thing I saw, Yiftach, is people here were really intrigued. I think everyone understands ITDR a little bit more today than they did yesterday, or even 36 minutes ago. So I'm grateful for you coming on. Any final parting words to our awesome audience?
Well, I definitely enjoyed. I enjoyed preparing this webinar. I've enjoyed basically, as funny as it may sound, I've actually it forced me to sort of recheck all my beliefs on ITDR. I've learned one or two new things, and I just want to give you a call out there. Identity protection, it's not a nice to have. This is an essential building block of your security infrastructure. If you don't have one in place, I do urge you, go and hunt for one. Don't take my word for it. As far as I'm concerned, check any one of the 50, 60 ITDR vendors out there. This is something you cannot afford yourselves not to have.
Brilliant. For everyone who tuned in today, thank you so much for taking time to check this out. If you have another topic you want us to cover, please let us know at thehackernews.com/webinars. We've brought Yiftach on, I think, 5 times, 6 times now in the last 18 months. So we do listen. We want to bring you topics you care about. Please make sure to go to thehackernews.com/webinars, and you can check out all the previous webinars with Yiftach and the team over at Silverfort in our webinar gallery. Those are on demand available, so go check those out as well. Thank you so much for tuning in. Go check out thehackernews.com. And on behalf of myself and the team behind your favorite website, I'll say stay cyber safe.